Well, thank you for having me. I am very glad to be the presenter today. Very glad to see so many familiar faces. So thanks for inviting me and thanks for having me speak today. These are all friendly faces. This is my B2B group, so that's nice. I am the owner of Brackett HR, and this is going into my 6th year in terms of my own HR consulting business and helping businesses that, quite honestly, are big enough to have HR problems, but not a big HR team. And so those are the shoes that I fill for most of my clients. I have been in HR for 30 years now. I liked it better when I could start this presentation and say almost 30 years, but it's official. And have been in the consulting space since 2005. I actually ran the numbers one time, and I think I've answered about 70,000 HR hotline calls over my tenure in the HR consulting space. You know, 5, 10, 15 calls a day. And over the years, doing this since 2005, I think I've got, close to 70,000 calls under my belt. I am going to be telling my spooky stories today, but honestly, it's not intended to be a speech. So if y'all have got spooky stories you want to share, feel free. I am happy to talk through anything that anybody has on their radar. But again, not meant to be a speech. So if you want to jump in there and share with the group, I'm happy to go there. So in terms of this one, I couldn't figure out where to fit it in. So I'm just going to tell it because it's one of my favorite. And it is my HR ho story. Has anybody in here heard my HR ho story? So, we are not talking a garden tool. So years ago, I had an employee. I was working in a call center. I was the HR manager at the time. And we had a problem employee. And so this employee was not getting her work done. Everybody else in the call center took hundreds of calls a day. She took a third as many as everybody else. So we were actually monitoring her phone calls. And again, we can talk about employee monitoring because that's part of what learning. It's not just about fun stories today. We're here to learn too. And so we're monitoring her phone calls. And that particular day, the phone call that I jumped on was, hey, why didn't you speak to me when I walked by your desk this morning? And it was a friend at the call center. And she said, girl, I couldn't talk to you today. That HR ho was standing at your desk. I am said HR ho in that scenario. And so forever, there's a small group of friends that now tease me and will call me that occasionally, and we all know the story. We all work together at that company. So yeah, I couldn't, as I was coming up with my subject matters for today, I was like, where does that story fit in? Yeah, I just really like it. So the reality is I will answer to most anything. In terms of some HR nightmares over the years, when I first went into the consulting business, one of the very first hotline calls that I got was, do I have to provide bathrooms for my employees? Y'all, I had been in HR for probably 10 plus years at that point. I picked up the phone thinking it was going to be, just like every other day, and the call I got was, do I have to provide bathrooms for my employees? And I think the really important thing to know about a good HR person is they ask and answer questions that you aren't even asking, right? So the more important question is why are you asking? And again, I came from sort of banking, insurance, the brokerage world. We just always had bathrooms. I never had to think about whether or not that was a requirement of a business. But again, this was one of the crazy ones. And so the gentleman called and he said, we have the question, do I have to provide bathrooms for my employees? And I said, why are you? I'm going to go with yes. I'm going to say yes. I will find out the why. I will get back to you on the why my answer is yes, because I think my answer is yes. But again, first day on my hotline, and yes, you have to provide bathrooms, but why are you asking? And I am sorry that it's a room full of people eating lunch, but I'm going to go there. And it was a manufacturing environment located in the middle of nowhere. I'm not going to share names. I'm protecting all the innocent today. But he said, we have a group of employees on the third shift that are acting like animals at work in terms of bathroom etiquette. Okay? So I'm going to leave that to y'all's imagination, but it was bad. And he said, Elizabeth, what we've done so far is we put a lock on the bathroom door. And so the employees have to come and get a key if they want to use the restroom on the third shift. And that hasn't worked out because the key disappears every night. And so we're having to replace the key over and over and over again. And so most recently, they came into work the next morning and the doors were gone. The bathroom doors had disappeared during the night. And so as the HR advisor, I said, hang on, why do these people still work for you? You know what? I mean, come on. My instinct is we need to back the train up. If you've got 15 people working on the third shift that don't know how to behave, I have an answer, right? At will employment, yeah. I mean, we have an answer. We'll go find 15 other people. And he said, Elizabeth, I'm in the middle of nowhere. It takes me months to fill an open position. You don't understand how glad I am that I have 15 people that show up for work every night on my third shift to do this tough job. Okay, I gotcha. So I went back and did some research, and the answer is it's not an HR rule. It's an OSHA rule. So it's a health and safety rule, which kind of is HR adjacent, right? So I got him, the official answer is yes. But now the HR consultant role is, okay, how can we figure it out? How can we figure it out? And at the end of the day, the reality is he probably didn't have 15 bad employees. He had 1 or 2 bad employees and 12 or 13 that were covering for the other couple, right? And so I did some research into the rule, and porta-johns count. I just have to provide facilities. They don't have to be the beautiful marble-topped counter facilities down the hall. So suggested putting a porta-john in there. One of my coworkers said that he had run into this. Really? Again, I came from the bank. Well, I got some stories. Don't worry, I got some bank stories. So I went. So he said, "Oh, I've had that happen, Elizabeth. What you do is you suspend the cleaning crew for a couple weeks. You assign bathroom cleanup alphabetically, and each night, and they will handle it amongst themselves. Yep. Pretty quickly, the 2 that are troublemakers will be ostracized by the 12 that aren't troublemakers because they're not interested in dealing with the bathroom for the night that's their bathroom." And so we suggested that to him. And so at the end of the day, He did both. The reality is he did both. And needless to say, it was addressed internally amongst the teammates. So that is horror story number 1. Any questions for me?
Should be number 2, right?
Oh, sorry. It is. It is. You're right. You're right.
Did the 2 offenders get exposed?
So not to leadership. Yeah, not to leadership.
We had that problem in middle school and high school when I was a teacher.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We couldn't figure it out, but that's we can't. Yeah.
Probably not.
It's your day to clean the bathroom.
Yeah. Exactly right. So that's the way they handled it internally. Also, one of the doozies of a hotline call, and if anybody follows me on LinkedIn, you'll know that I'll put some of these stories out on LinkedIn, tell some of my HR nightmares. But one of them is we had an employee who came to work. They had him go through the onboarding process, sign all the paperwork, gave him the keys to the company car, and disappeared. With the company car. Hours later, we heard from him. He had been kidnapped, allegedly. That's HR person's favorite word. He had been allegedly kidnapped. They were asking for $5,000 in ransom. He was asking the company to pay for the ransom. And by the way, the company car was gone. So it had been stolen, the company car was. So in that particular call, it was oh my gosh, Elizabeth, we have this situation, what do we do? You need to call the police. That's going to be your next phone call. Well, they told us they'd kill him if we called the police. I'm like, yeah, that's what they say. I've seen that in the movies. But I still think you need to call the police and get the police involved. And by the way, what did this guy's background check look like when you hired him? Oh, should we have done a background check? What about his references? How did his reference check out? Should we be doing references? Well, when you look at his application, when you look at his previous employers and reasons for leaving, what does it say? Oh, should we be using an application? So all of those things, as we're having the conversation about the call is about the kidnapped employee, the alleged kidnapped employee. But it turns into well, hang on. You need to do a background check. You need to check employees' references. You need to have them fill out an application rather than just accepting a resume. And then ultimately, the question is so the guy turned up, obviously. It doesn't have a happy ending for the employer because obviously they had to fire the guy. But the question is what about his last paycheck? What about the fact that this car is nowhere to be found and the employee, didn't sign anything in terms of, authorizations. So they've got a final paycheck for the guy for working a day and a half. But meanwhile, they're taking him to court over the fact that there's a missing company car in the mix. So that was a doozy in terms of HR hotline. The last one that I had is a workers' comp story. And this particular employee called out, and day 1 called out, day 2 called out, day 3. And so we called the employee and said, what's going on? And he said, well, I was shot on the job. Sorry, what? It was an installation of services company, and he alleged that he had been shot on the job. And so, we immediately go into workers' comp. Hang on. When did this happen? Happened Friday afternoon. Okay. Well, oh my gosh, are you okay? Did you go to the hospital? Yep, shot on the job, went to the clients to do the installation, and the homeowner came out on the front porch and took a couple shots at me, and one of them nicked me. I'm okay. Doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound right is the answer. And at the end of the day, so the employer had called me months previously and asked me the question about, can we put GPS trackers on our employees' vans? And the answer was, yes, you can. And they did. And so we pulled the GPS tracking report for this particular van, and it had not left his driveway in days, including the alleged day of the installation / shot on the job. So we confronted him and found out that he had indeed been shot, but it did not happen on the job. Had nothing to do with work. So we ended up, obviously terminating him for faking that particular instance, situation. In terms of one of the things that comes up as an HR consultant a good bit is behavior that happens off the clock, and what can I as an employer do, right? So this is, North Carolina has a lawful use of lawful products law, which refers to, again, off the clock behavior, lawful behavior is protected in North Carolina under this lawful use of lawful products. Think smoking. That's probably the easiest, most likely example, or the thing, when you think about lawful use of lawful products. It could also be drinking, right? Like, it's perfectly legal to have a drink. So lawful use of lawful products rules in North Carolina. But what if that now rears its ugly head at work? So they're doing something that is not unlawful, but it is affecting your business. So things like posing naked for a calendar in your town. Yep, I've had it.
For the calendar?
I mean, I had the hotline call. Yes. Had the hotline call that this particular employee had been found out. Anybody want to take a guess how she was found out?
So
Somebody saw it. Yes, somebody saw it. For sure. Somebody saw the calendar, and they had customers, clients, bring this to their attention. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, she hadn't done anything that wasn't lawfully her right to do, but now it was affecting his business. So he was having customers complain about the employee. And so the question was, Elizabeth, what can I do as an employer to address this as far as this employee, in the course of this getting out, we're, so many days into it, and I have had multiple clients say to me, if she works for you, I am not a customer anymore. And so when we talk about lawful use and we talk about off-hours behavior, that's one of the things that is part of the analysis is, well, hang on a second, is it affecting your business? Is it disrupting your business? Just because somebody may be within their rights to go do something, they don't have the right to disrupt your business, to lose customers for you, to cause, again, not legal problems, but employee relations problems, right? So you've seen, interestingly enough, you've seen this a good bit with politics. With politics, again, people have their political beliefs, but at the point that we can't get work done, because of your political beliefs and them showing up at work, well, now we have an employee relations problem. Again, this is off-hours behavior that is legitimately lawful, but now I've got coworkers that don't want to work with you. I've got clients that don't want to see you as part of our business relationship. So things like that happen off hours. So we definitely have had, the politics one come up. We've had the posing for a nude calendar once upon a time. Yes?
I'm curious, in your experience, so the layers and I guess the limitations of employee at will, because, this sounds like a very viable reason, but an employer can't just be like, oh, I don't like you, and can you just explain the structure? Does it need to be multiple warnings? Does it depend on the business?
So it's about protecting the business. Mm-hmm. So if an employer is going to let somebody go and think that they can just hang their hat on, well, North Carolina's at will, the reality is the employer is going to be responsible for showing that it had nothing to do with race, color, religion, national origin, disability, genetic information, etc. The protected categories that we have in the EEO laws. And so, if I let somebody go and think at will is going to solve all my problems, it's not going to solve all my problems. The employee or the ex-employee in the scenario you're describing is going to say, oh, hang on. I think it's because or I think it's because I told my boss that I have this disability, or my boss found out that I'm, whatever, fill in the blank. It's now, the burden of proof now shifts to the employer to say, whoa, no, had nothing to do with the fact that I know this, or she told us that, but the burden of proof is now on the employer. And again, if my argument or my defense is going to be employment at will says I can do it, you're not going to win. That's going to be a tough leap for the purposes of that. So you, the employer, have to be protected. And you're right, you do that with warnings, disciplinary action, you do that with handbook policies in place to protect yourself, following your procedures, being consistent with what you've done with previous employees. Absolutely. Yeah.
Are there companies out there that do background checks, or is that like a governmental thing?
So there's absolutely companies that do background checks. Some are better than others. Yeah. So again, and depending on the level of, I tell my clients all the time, depending on the level of access a person's going to have, kind of dictates what tier of background check I might need. So, working with children, working with finances. Mm-hmm. Yep. So there's different levels of background checks, and yes, there are good vendors out there that can help.
That can help fix those termination
Yes.
issues or prevent it from going higher.
Right, exactly. Yeah, find out about those people before they come work for you. Absolutely. Yes?
I think you've talked about this before. Going into social media prior to hiring someone, you can scour their social media presence and use that as a decision factor.
So tread carefully is my answer. Yes, if I, the candidate, put stuff out on social media, it's fair game to be seen. What I really think is very important as far as social media is concerned is I don't want every hiring manager out there scouring social media trying to uncover all the skeletons. You get that? Did you catch that? All the skeletons in my candidates' closets. Because let's say, as an example, that my hiring manager is out there Googling somebody's name and comes back and says, well, I found that there's a Facebook page where this person is part of XYZ group. So this is actually a true, this is my true hotline story right here. What's a Wiccan? I had that. What's a Wiccan, Elizabeth? It's like the Witches and the Wiccans Society. Oh, because we found out that this person is president of the Charlotte Wiccan Society. One of my hiring managers is out there cyber stalking this candidate and has uncovered something about this person being the president of the Witches and Wiccan Society in I guess maybe Charlotte, don't remember exactly, but I'm assuming Charlotte. And can we ask them about it? Can we disqualify them because of this? Anybody want to take a stab at why it might be protected? Religion. Yeah. So the question is, you know, can I cyberstalk somebody and find out about them on the internet? And the answer is yes. But be careful what you know. You can't unknow it. And so I always tell my managers to not do that. So let the HR person do it. Let somebody on the leadership do it. Let an HR consultant do it. Because quite honestly, I will gatekeep that information. I will share what is relevant that I found, cyber stalking this person. But, you know, if I have my managers out there doing it, they're not going to know what, I don't have the faith in them to feel like they're going to know what's a legitimate disqualifier that they've uncovered versus what is not. So yes, you can do it. I would make sure that the person doing it is savvy in the rules around what's protected and what's not. Yeah, good question though. What else? Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I worked for a place once where we made a really, really bad hiring decision of a leader. And back in the day, when you called for a reference, you could have a conversation, you know, and really kind of get to know that person's performance and interaction with others and all those sorts of things. This is right after that kind of got squelched. And when you call, it's like, yes, they worked for us from this time to this time. You know, we've got very limited information. So we're at a national convention with people that have these kinds of leaders. And a group of our group who was miserable because we knew a really bad hire had been made, ran into the group that had just gotten rid of this leader. And they're like, you should have called us.
Yeah.
We'd have told you this was a bad mistake. Is that legal?
Yeah. Yeah. So North Carolina, South Carolina, and 40 other states have reference immunity laws. And the reference immunity law protects the employers in that they are allowed to give fact-based, objective references. And so getting a phone call saying, you know, can you tell me if this person, you know, was a good employee? I have to be mindful about what I say. So, you know, she was a crackhead and we fired her is not the right answer, but she was terminated for violating our company alcohol and drug policy and she's not eligible for rehire. I have given that person on the other end of the phone exactly what they need to know, and I have done it in a way that the employer is protected. So reference immunity laws, objective, fact-based, that you can tie back to a company policy, that's a great option. The other thing that I do with all of my clients is we put a reference authorization in place. We have them sign it as part of their onboarding process that says, I authorize XYZ company to provide a reference on me if you're ever asked. And it's just an added layer of insurance, quite honestly, because again, I'm going to default to the fact that we've got a reference immunity law in most states. But the reality is I do that as extra insurance for my clients. I have them sign it on day one. It goes in their personnel file. I never think about it again until 40 years down the road, somebody calls me for a reference on this ex-employee. The ex-employee doesn't like what I said. I still have that reference authorization that they signed as part of their onboarding.
But, oh,
No.
but what about, in this case, leadership and HR had hired this person with whatever referencing they did, and those of us that were the brunt of the bad hire, if we had hired, let's say that I had called my colleague at the other place, somebody more at my level,
Mm-hmm.
and found out this person's an absolute nightmare, could I have done something
Yeah.
about that to stop the hire?
I mean, that's an internal procedures question more than an HR rules and regulations questions. But the reality is you certainly would have not done anything wrong to escalate it to the people making the hiring decision to say, I need to make you aware of what I have heard, even if it's through the grapevine.
Okay.
You know, when we talk about things that us as employers are really quite honestly required to share, violence in the workplace. So if it's a safety thing, you know, there are plenty of negligence scenarios where an employer didn't check, or checked and the ex-employer didn't share. And then you run into legal trouble as far as negligence is concerned, either not checking or not sharing. So, you know, sharing vital information as far as safety and harassment. So those are the two things as far as the bar. At a minimum, employers need to be sharing there's a safety concern or there's a harassment concern as part of this person's termination. So that is a bare minimum. But yeah, I mean, in your situation, I think you would have absolutely been within your rights to escalate it and say, I'm aware and I want to make you aware, and somebody needs to go vet this guy a step further. Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. Yeah, John.
Do you recommend your clients that they record all phone conversations?
I haven't recommended that yet. I mean, the reality is it's usually the tables are turned. Most of the time, it's the employee or the candidate that is wanting to record the conversations. And again, every state has different recording laws as far as can I in that situation. So, but no, recording the conversations has some benefits, but the reality is it has a lot of baggage associated with it. Especially, I mean, again, in this context, we're talking about a recruiting conversation. How warm and fuzzy does that recruiting conversation feel? So, but yeah, I mean, a lot of my clients are doing it as part of their Zoom calls, their Zoom interviews and things like that. And we're just setting up permissions ahead of time that they know that the call is going to be recorded. Yeah.
So every time I call out of my office, I'm always prompted, hey, we're going to record this conversation.
Uh-huh.
Edward Jones doesn't record conversations. Why? But everybody else out there does it. Hey, why do we not record our conversations to cover our butts?
Yeah. I don't know. It may be that Edward Jones is operating based on the fact that they are in multiple states, and they would have to be paying attention to, it's okay in this state, but it's not okay in this state. And so they may have just made an executive decision that we're not gonna, rather than trying to manage, I can in North Carolina, but I can't in wherever else.
Okay, makes things
Yeah.
complicated.
It does make things complicated. Yes.
We usually tell our clients, because when we are placing someone with a company that we're representing and we're bringing a candidate to the table, that we'll do the reference checks. And one thing that I always try to keep in mind is, it is not illegal for us to ask a question, about this person's performance. What they tell us is up to them. And no offense to HR, but there are a lot of times where I don't want to call into like a banking HR or a huge corporation's HR, because they are only going to verify employment dates and they're not going to give you anything. Simply because they didn't work with the person. So when I get references from candidates, I always ask them for their direct manager. That's who I want to talk to. And I have a form and, the same questions that I ask for everyone. And again, it's up to them to give me the information. It's not illegal for me to ask.
Well, and I would say that even taking that a step further, if you have them fill out an application, the application says, who did you report to, dates of employment, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the guy I'm going to call. So even people will send a resume with an attached reference sheet to it, again, if you ask me for my list of references, who am I going to give you as my list of references? The people that love me the most. And so as a way to be sure that I'm talking to the right people, I'm probably going to call on that application the list of who was your last supervisor, who was your last supervisor, who was your last supervisor. And to your point, when you're calling into a big corporation, especially a big corporation, you're going to get 1-800 go to employment verification that they've outsourced it to.
And if you have an HR generalist checking those references, they're just checking a box. Yeah, I asked. They said they verified the employment dates. Check, check,
Right.
check. They're not vested in getting feedback.
Right.
You know, like I'm vested. I want some feedback, and I want to make sure we're not making a hiring mistake here. So,
How do you offset that? Because most of your Fortune 500 companies, like I know all the big banks, they use the work number. And that's gonna be it. There's nothing, even if you had me as a direct supervisor.
I asked the candidate.
But I've had employees, I've had those calls, I can't give you no info.
Correct.
If I answered your question, I could lose my job because that's against protocol, because I'm supposed to say, call the work number.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it, even if you
So
have.
you're not
information.
allowed to give a reference. You have to say call the.
Mhm. Just because of the chance that could go to court.
Well,
it's not
hopefully
even
they've
worth
had
it.
more than one job.
Well, and again, that's part of what,
Right.
Corporations.
again, that's part of what we're talking about in terms of, if you have an HR generalist, they're going to make that one phone call. They're going to get Joe saying, sorry, call the 1-800 number, and that's going to be the end. But again, if somebody is involved in the process that has that vested interest, Kelly's not going to take no for an answer. No. Or she's going to get a no from Joe. She's going to go back to that candidate and be like, I got a no from Joe. Who else you got? Mm-hmm. Right? So having that person especially for critical hires. Yeah. I mean, the reality is you might not do that for every Tom, Dick, and Harry that you hire, but for your really key hires, I'm going to put somebody on the team that's going to be a bulldog about checking references, right? So for sure. Okay, any other questions about that?
So like for vendors and subcontractors, I use an informal, I mean like we're all in a small planet on LinkedIn, and so you can just work your way over and collect an unsolicited reference to a vendor, no problem. What about for employees? Can you use an unsolicited reference? Like, hey, this person used to work at XYZ company. I know people over there, just place the call without that being the employee offering that reference.
Yeah, I mean, again, to me that feels no, and that feels more like like vetting the candidate through your network. Mm-hmm. So the reality is I would just keep good documentation.
If you buy me a beer, I'll tell you all about the candidate. If you call me officially.
That's right. I'm not going on the record, but here's what you need to know. And again, the reality is I tell clients all the time, you can say a lot by saying very little.
That's right. Somebody said to me one time, and I made the mistake and hired this person anyway. I said, now, the reason for leaving on her application and in the interview was that she was downsized. The person goes, yeah, you could say that. And I hired this girl. Biggest mistake I ever made. Just the inflection in her voice, I should have. As I've made hiring mistakes, and I have learned from them.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask them, would you hire them again? I would ask.
So, Joe, that's exactly right. Worst case scenario, if I get a Joe Martinez on the phone and he won't tell me anything, I will ask him, are they eligible for rehire? And that's exactly right. And the person usually will be like, absolutely not. I'm like, thank you very much. Thank you very much, yes. So having that, at the very least, what's their rehire status? And somebody will usually be like, I'm like, okay, thank you. Yes.
Very good. So obviously all these policies and procedures to put in place are really important. I'm curious if you've come across just companies kind of skipping certain steps, like when it comes to nepotism, or like how do you handle that from an HR perspective?
Well, so that's up to company policy as far as nepotism is concerned. There's no HR rule about it in HR regulations. I mean, the reality is most of the time when I'm doing handbooks for people, I'll ask the question, do you have a nepotism? If not a policy, do you have a practice, right? Mm-hmm. And again, there's some businesses that are built on nepotism. The insurance business is, it was my granddad's agency, and then it was my dad's agency, and now it's my agency, and I'm going to bring my kids in. Right, exactly right. Like I'm building this, so the insurance agency in particular was like that, and again, other organizations are like that as well. So if your company is built on, well, yeah, my best electrician is my brother-in-law, and he's my, so we have to figure that out as far as nepotism is concerned. But the reality is a good nepotism policy is going to talk about no conflict of interest, no supervisory responsibilities over one person or the other, no perceived or perception of conflict of interest, because sometimes you'll have that, no favoritism. If there's the perception of favoritism, the perception of a conflict of interest, here's how we're going to handle it, here's what our process is going to be. So yes, a good nepotism policy is going to be part of a good handbook.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going back to the handbook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So talking about some scary harassment stories, and again, I can do these all day. I do teach a whole class on harassment, and the scary stories come up. But one of my very first days in human resources, this is a banking story, and so not everything crazy happens at the manufacturing facility. But the call we got was that the branch manager had called security and said, I need the tapes for my branch for this weekend. They videotaped as part of their security processes different areas of the branch, and he said, I need those tapes. Now, the reality is what he didn't know is the tapes were taped over every 7 days. So they were not archived in any way. If he had just kept his cake hole shut, it would have been taped over in 7 days. And by the way, the tapes weren't watched. They just went on the shelf, February 21st, 1997, up on the shelf. And they sat there for 7 days, and then they went back into the kit and got taped over. The fact that he asked for the tapes red flagged to the security officer, we need to look at it. So this particular branch manager was having an affair with one of his employees, one of his direct reports, and they were having an affair in the stairwell. So,
An affair?
they were having an affair in the stairwell. This is going to live on YouTube forever, so I have to tread carefully how I'm putting things out there. But yes, use your imagination. And so that's not the end of the story. So now we've got an integrity issue with this branch manager because, rather than doing what was the right thing, he pitched a fit and went to security and demanded the tapes and escalated it, quite honestly, unnecessarily. And so the two people were having an affair, the two employees, and the decision was made to demote him and move him to another branch in a different state. So he had to go home that night and explain to his wife and family, we don't live here anymore. And but guess what happened to the teller, the bank teller? Yeah.
Why did he get fired?
That's a great question. And I'm sure as they wrote that check to her in terms of disparity in the way that they were treated, the two people who were participants, equal participants, but again, he was in a supervisory role. So arguably, in terms of allegations of harassment, He was in the leadership position, but yeah, they demoted him and moved him and terminated her. And needless to say, it resulted in a situation where she did have a good claim. And there wasn't any legal justification other than, well, he's the more valuable of the two. And that's not gonna help you. So yeah. So when we talk about, the decisions that we make as a result of an employment situation like that, we have to be sure that we are paying attention to, how is this going to look? How is this going to be perceived, right? I had a hotline call one time, and they were all at a sales conference. Everything exciting happens at a sales conference, apparently. And they were at a sales conference, and one of the senior most people in the organization had way too much to drink and insisted that the one lady on the team in particular call him a very rude and inappropriate name that referenced his
Physiology.
his skill sets. And he insisted that he be referenced as this for the rest of the night. He sent text messages. So now he's put it out there, and it's well documented. And include, so as the night goes on, it becomes, needless to say, very uncomfortable for the woman, for the employee. She ends up going back to her hotel room. He starts banging on her door during the night. Banging on her door, insisting that she open the door, that they are a match made in heaven, and that, it's going to be magical if she'll just open the door. So obviously she is now scared. It's gone from uncomfortable to scared. So she gets up in the middle of the night and leaves the conference. Gets back to her company and tells them what happened. I've got pictures, I've got recording, I've got video, I've got text messages, you name it. And the company calls me and says, what are we going to do? He's our best sales guy we have. He's $1 million producer, Elizabeth. And I said, here's the problem. If he still works there, then you've set the bar really, really, really low in terms of what is acceptable behavior in your organization. There's not going to be any coming back from that. And the reality was the gal, she wasn't the one, wasn't going to take it anywhere, just wanted them to be aware. So it wasn't even we got an EEOC charge out of this or anything else. She came back to the company and said, you need to know that this happened. And I said to them, again, you can't have the bar set that low in terms of what is acceptable behavior and you still get to work here. So they had to terminate him in spite of the fact that he's $1 million producer, right? Yeah. I had a situation one time where one of my sales guys went to a client's and the receptionist said, Bob's going to be a few more minutes. Is there anything I can do for you while you wait? She meant get him a cup of coffee or a bottle of water. But he decided that he thought it would be funny to tell her exactly what would be great in the few minutes he had before the meeting started. And I got the call as the HR person from her HR person, when she called her HR person. And again, the fact that it happened off campus, the fact that it happened at a client's, doesn't matter. It still happened in the course of everybody being at work, even though he was there in an employment capacity. And she was there as an employee, even though she wasn't our employee. So we still have to react, we still have to address, we still have to just, be the responsible HR person, the responsible business owner as far as handling a situation like that.
How was that situation handled?
Well, I would love to tell you that the company did the right thing. So I got the phone call and, oh my gosh, and called my bosses and said, this is what happened. And my bosses said, Elizabeth, he's $1 million producer. You can write him up, put it in his file, but as long as he's making that kind of money for the company, he's not going anywhere. And I got my resume together and resigned because that's not an organization that I want to be affiliated with.
Yeah. And the other guy got terminated because it was like close to being physical situation.
Well, that was a different company, right?
Well, it was a different company, and the other guy got terminated because they listened to me.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Versus the other scenario, I gave them that advice, and they said, no, sorry, thanks, but no thanks. So, yeah, that tells you I don't want to work for that company, is what that ended up saying to me.
And you were an actual employee, is there?
I was an employee. I was the HR director. Yeah. So I was the HR person for that organization when I got that one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you go into consulting after that?
No. So one more job after that, and then into consulting. Yeah, absolutely.
Quick question, the kidnapped guy, how'd they get the car back? Did they withhold his last paycheck before you took the car?
You're not allowed to hold the last paycheck, John. So, no, they eventually got the car back. But the reality is I can't hold somebody's paycheck for ransom. So I've got to pay the guy in spite of the fact that, there's a car still missing. I can go after the guy about the car, but I can't hold the paycheck for ransom. Sorry. That was not something that I could get away with doing. And then in terms of best practices when it comes to letting somebody go, the worst termination that I ever had was I was an HR manager working in a call center, and we were I had what was called the fishbowl office, so the big glass office in the middle of the call center. And we had an employee, a very problematic employee, and his days were numbered. We brought him into my office to do the termination, and I'm going to show my age a little bit here. And I need everybody who is of the age to remember Sanford and Son. And when Fred Sanford would start clutching his heart and flopping around the room, screaming for Elizabeth and screaming he was coming Elizabeth, that was the termination I had. So I said to the gentleman, we're letting you go. He jumped out of the chair, knocked the chair over, started flailing around my office, which again, I remember I'm in the fishbowl, so I have 400 associates that pop their head up over the top of their cube walls trying to figure out what is going down in the HR lady's office. And again, he has thrown himself against the door, thrown himself against the table, knocked over chairs, clutching his chest, screaming. And we ended up having to call 911. We ended up having to call 911 as part of his fake heart attack. And at the end of the day, the point is you want to be really mindful about where you're doing your terminations, what time you're doing your terminations, how you're doing them. You know, I get the question a lot, can I do it by phone? It's not great. It's not a best practice. You know, sending somebody a pink slip or calling somebody telling them that they're getting the boot, that's not perfect. But, you know, you need to do an analysis of kind of what are the circumstances around this termination. Yes?
Don't you always usually want to have someone else in the room too?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, having a second person in the room is the best practice. I had somebody else in the room that particular day, didn't help me at all. So, you know, I had a witness in the office and I had 400 other witnesses watching over their cue balls. And, you know, the reality is, you know, think about what you're doing. Think about where you're doing it. Think about, is this the right time? Is this the right place? So pay attention to those things as far as doing a termination, because there's a lot more that goes into it as far as the analysis of not just, you know, best practices, but also risk. You know, in that particular case, should I have had security involved? Didn't think I needed it, but we ended up post pretend heart attack, we ended up having to have security on the site for a couple weeks until things calmed down with him. So didn't know that going into it, but yeah. So yes.
So when you're terminating someone, releasing them back to the market, who should you're there with someone else, who should have that conversation? Is it the HR professional or that person's supervisor?
So there's not a yes or no answer to that. It depends on who is skilled, trained, who's the right person to have it. Generally, my answer is going to be the manager. Best practice is going to be the manager should have that conversation. But with that being said, there's circumstances where the manager isn't comfortable or he's not the right person, or I've had it in situations where the relationship between the manager and the employee is so volatile that he's not the right person to do it or she's not the right person to do it. And so in that situation, I am going to tell you who's your pitch hitter, right? And it could be the HR person in the room. I've had the employment lawyer in the room. So depending on how volatile the situation is, I've had the attorneys in the room for part of it. So, yeah. So the answer is the hiring manager is 99% of the time the right person, unless there's extenuating circumstances, and sometimes there are legitimate reasons why that manager's not.
Plan for it. I can't tell you the amount of terminations I've had and the reactions that I have.
Yeah.
I mean, I've literally terminated somebody and the person got on in the middle of the lobby, not at the third, different thing, and defecated in the lobby.
Oh my
I
God.
said, take that.
No way.
And we've never expected that in a million years.
Would you
From
recall?
that person.
So yeah.
I've
So-
had stuff thrown, I've had people take off their clothes.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll have to do this again next year, Joe, and we can do it together. That's right. We could do a panel discussion of some sort.
Like I have
Yeah.
group stories, like
Oh, I have a list. You'll have to come back for the sequel, and I can get into all those stories. But anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's attention. If anybody has any questions and wants to grab me, I'm happy to answer them. So, thank you.
Thank you.